Right. Hello, Jules.
Hi, Miss
I'm
Claire.
excited about this. I'm excited about this.
Me too.
So, why don't you introduce yourself and what we're going to be talking about today? Because I want to do least talking, you do the most.
Okay. Well, I am the owner of Metamorph Health and Fitness, which is a health company here on the Gold Coast. And amongst other things, I am a personal trainer, a biomechanics method specialist, a holistic health coach, a sports nutritionist, and an AMN practitioner.
Wow. And you do a lot. I know this. And you are a woman after my own heart and out there doing all that can be done to help people. And, you are a Christian practitioner as well. Everything we do is for Jesus, which we absolutely love here. And that's how we've connected, isn't it? And when I first heard you talk about AMN, I'd never heard of it. It from what I hear, is really worst kept secret in the world of how to heal trauma, help trauma, and it needs to get out there. So, however many interviews we need to do, but this one particularly is to help people understand when we refer you as to what is AMN like. So, let's just start with what does AMN stand for?
It stands for Applied Movement Neurology.
Okay. And so leading into that, what's your personal testimony of how you got into AMN? Like how did it show up in your world? Because I'm 47, I've been in trauma coaching for 15 years and I'd never heard of it. And I just think it's a crime. So we need to how did you get into it? How did you
It
get
is
into
a it is a very well kept secret, that's for sure. So I fell into AMN. Well, it wasn't really a fall. It was so many divine interconnections that happened at that time that it couldn't have been anything else but God that led me to AMN. So I used to be an athlete for Australia and I suffered a really intense lower back injury from overtraining. And there was a period in my life where it was about 18 months, I couldn't walk.
Right. Gosh, I don't
And
think I knew that. Yeah. Okay.
okay. Yeah, so it was a tough time. It completely changed my personality of who I really was. So I went from being this amazing, gregarious, outgoing, loving person, encourager, to not being able to move, being in pain 24/7. My husband had to dress me every morning, and I was still right in the middle of this lane of personal trainer. So he would dress me, walk me out. We have at home studios. So he would walk me out to our studio, sit me down on the weight bench, and then my clients would come and go through the day. And all I could do was sit and tell them what to do. I couldn't actually participate with them. So even though I was still in personal training and helping people, I felt so far off my path.
Right. Yeah.
Because here I was, this fit, happy, vibrant person that was the complete opposite of where I was to
Mm,
where I found myself. And I tried everything, any modality that you could imagine. I tried it to see if I could get some relief and some release.
yeah.
Um, Western medicine had me under all sorts of scans and scopes and wanted to do exploratory surgery on my back because they couldn't actually find what was happening because of the position of the injury. So what had actually happened was some of my spine had actually blown out and
Right.
my sciatic nerve was crushed.
Oh.
And so I had no feeling to the dead fish kind of yucky sciatic feeling right down into my feet. And I found a company in the UK called Biomechanics Method who were offering a specialist course. So I did the specialist course, and within inside of a couple of months, I was able to walk again to the
Wow.
point where I could then dance. And this kind of modality was really dealing with fascial tissue and the manipulation and movement and suppleness of fascia tissue. So I was able to release myself from most of the pain. And in doing that, I become one of their master practitioners. And I was working with a lot of stroke clients. So people that functions had that, like doctors had told them their functions wouldn't return. So certain core stability movements or fine motor skills, they
Mm,
would be lacking those for the rest of their life. And what I found with the biomechanics method was that all of these things that they were told, no, you won't get that back, they were happening for these clients. They were getting mobility back. They were able to have core strength and get themselves out
Wow.
of bed. And if they
Right.
fell forward, they could stabilize themselves. It was incredible. So it kind of led me to this place of, okay, there's something more than just the fascia going on here. And this is when I kind of fell into neuroscience. And
Yeah.
so I started studying a course on neuroscience from
Yeah.
an American university. I was so enamored by this subject. I fell into all of Dr. Caroline Leaf's stuff.
Yes, we love you, Caroline Leaf.
Gosh, just biggest girl crush, fell in love with this woman. And I
Yes.
think because, Big Brother, I was researching neuroscience and I was like eating all of her papers. This little ad popped up on the side of my Facebook one day for AMN. And when I clicked on it and read their little bio of how does AMN work and what's it for,
Yeah.
I was like, this is it, God. This is what I've been looking for.
Yeah.
So it was all about, their little blurb was all about normalizing bioelectrical charges,
Yeah.
which syncs the way that neurology can fire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we're basically improving the activation of neurology with AMN to be able to bring all of these frequencies in the body back into normalcy so we can actually flick the switch to move properly in towards healing.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, and you led beautifully into what I would say next, which is what is AMN? Like, how does it even work? But for the person who's looking for, so it sounds like what AMN also does is focus on fascia release. You talked about fascia release. So what does that do, and how does that help the neuro firing come back into balance or regulate?
Mm. So Fasher is like he's kind of left behind in this modern kind of like movement world.
Yeah,
Everybody understands muscles, everyone understands skeletal
yeah.
and functional movement, but none of that actually happens without fascia.
Right. So it's underlining then everything that's still moving.
It's our structure. So we kind of think that our bones are our structure, but the fascia is actually our structure.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it holds everything together. It helps muscles to move smoothly over one another. It's an incredible electrical matrix too. So it's a foundation for most of the electrical signals that run through the system. So we're talking brain to organs or
Yeah.
brain to muscle.
Yeah.
The fascia controls all of that as well as the lymphatic system. So our main aquatic organ, the detoxification processing is all controlled
Mm.
by how supple is your fascia?
Is that a question? I have no idea. I've never really spoke about fascia, to be honest. I talk about central nervous polyvagal theory, amygdala, fight, flight, and free, all of that. And I'd imagine I just didn't realize that was all fascia supported or all fascia. When we're doing like obviously tapping and what you do, it's fascia then.
Yeah,
Why
it
have you never
really.
mentioned that to me? Like, what? That's just mad. I've
Well, if
always
you
studied
think
from a neuroscience perspective, and the fascia is never really mentioned.
no,
Oh,
no, hardly, hardly ever. So if
no.
you think about like muscle tissue, right? You've got a bicep muscle; it starts and it stops.
Yeah, yeah.
There's fascias from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet,
It's crazy.
and there's multiple lines and depths of
Yeah.
fascia as well.
Okay. And so, yeah, so that leads me on to obviously we can go into the neuroscience another time because I definitely want to do a interview on that and how that all works. But, for somebody who's looking, so you've mentioned that it helps with mobility and so many other things, but today we're talking about the healing of emotional and mental trauma. So obviously you've got clients for other things, but what about why does it help with emotional and mental symptoms of trauma?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. Really
Mm,
good question. So, from the standpoint that we understand with AMN, is that the limbic brain is a massive controller of the body, right?
yeah,
So, limbic helps us to form memory. And a lot of trauma, so the word trauma is like a really broad thing, too, though. Like,
true, true.
people call like some little incidences trauma, whereas it might be just an emotional context or something that we
Yeah.
haven't been taught properly how to deal with. But
Sticks.
in the neurology of trauma, it's the brain, or the germ layers in the brain are in divisions. So there's 3 different divisions and subdivisions.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all what formed us cellularly when we're born, right? So we're like one cell first.
Yeah.
And then as we grow, we divide, and those become different germ layers.
Yeah.
Those germ layers are still present in our brain.
Mm-hmm.
So when we suffer a trauma, it could hit one of those different germ layers in the brain, depending on what kind of trauma it is, what message signal it sends, and wherever that is affected in the brain, it'll actually pick up symptomatically somewhere in the body.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
For
Yeah.
example, if somebody has just gone into complete overwhelm,
Yeah.
this is a message of the heart. So it's transferred from that germ layer in the brain to the actual organ.
Yeah.
And then the organ can start showing up symptoms of overwhelm, as far as changes in breathing, stress responses, feeling overloaded, feeling out of control. And then the emotional context can come from that.
Yeah. Yeah. And how does AMN help that? On
So,
simplest terms, yeah.
yeah,
I know
we
you could go into that a lot deeper.
yeah.
I'm stopping there on the neurological level, but how does that help someone in a session typically?
Yeah, well, a lot of the time we don't know the context of why we're feeling the way that we are.
Yeah.
We've been so cleverly taught to switch off from body signals and codes that our body are actually trying to tell us and instruct us. So not many people would know that if you're in overwhelm in the heart, that the muscles here on the top of the shoulder are all connected to heart, not as in fully connected, but
No.
as an inflammatory response. If the heart gets too overwhelmed in this trauma, it will send a signal to these muscles to help to deal with some of the inflammation, to try and push the body towards healing. So if you tighten sore up in the top of the shoulders here, or on the outside of your thighs, that can also indicate that there's something going on with the heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
So AMN can help to actually pinpoint what is the trauma, what's caused this response in the system. We can even find out when it was from, because a lot of the time we don't, some people can't remember, as far as in PTSD.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or, shutting the trauma out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we can pinpoint the timing of that as well. And we can actually ask the brain, because what we're doing is asking the neurology to fire and give the information that's needed, so that we can start changing some of that electrical firing that's happening and reduce the inflammatory load in the body.
Yeah.
And then the body is more able to easily shift that out of the system.
Yeah, that makes sense. Although the linguistics, like you say, trauma is used an awful lot for many different, it represents many different things for people, doesn't it, across the world linguistically. So, but when you look at somatic therapy, it's that we know the trauma isn't the event. It's the stored and coded cellular memory and belief that causes the problem here and now. So what we're looking at, even though you're talking about germ in the brain and heart center and things like that, the way many will know it is non-conscious, unconscious. When you say heart matter, what we're talking about here really is stored and coded, suppressed, whether you remember it or not, neurological wiring of memory, and that cellular memory causes responses, which you like you say is that kind of response of inflammation and problems that then cause emotional upheaval, etc. So there's so many different ways we can explain it and do it, but you're really going into the biofeedback. I love the way you explain what's going on in the body. When you say heart, would you say from a psychologist perspective, we're talking about the unconscious, the quantum nature of memory and who we are from conception to now? When the Bible talks about heart, it talks about your absolute deep identity. When you talk about heart, you're talking about the different things, but it's that quantum stuff that you just can't, it's out of time, space and matter, right?
Yeah,
when you talk
that's
about the
that's
heart.
true. Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
you can be thrown into being 3-year old again when that man looks at you the same way dad did in that trauma. So while the
Exactly.
trauma isn't the event of how dad looked at you, we need to explain to people that trauma, and what we mean by trauma is it's when the brain couldn't handle it because resources weren't there when you were younger, the body stored and coded it as a belief and event. And then from that, we have massive responses as we go forward. Yeah.
Because we move out of that perception.
Yeah.
So we move and live and breathe from that perception. So
Yeah.
quite
So
often,
good.
when things come up with AMN, it's the revelation that you hold that perception that actually can help to start shift it out of the
Totally.
system.
Brilliant. Great way to say it. It's all perception, isn't it?
Yeah.
From the resources and the perception of pre-8 to the resources and perception of a 45-year-old
Yeah.
shifts everything, right? And then the cellular memory or neuroscience behind that shifts with it. So isn't perception and perspective just everything?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. But I love what you're saying there. So let's take a deep dive into what a session looks like for a client. When they come to you, majority of your practice, is it trauma, or would you say you do a lot of mobility and body work? Is it all connected, would you say?
Yeah, there is a big mix, and it's really quite individual.
Right.
So each person can be completely different, even if they've, gone through the same trauma, if their body's read it in the same way, even if they have the same perception of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, from one session to the next, it can be very different for each person. So sometimes what I'm checking in, so I'm using manual muscle testing
Right.
as a form of being able to dig into the messages of the brain and the body. And we're looking at like what is going to give them the resource or the appropriate action that can actually help to keep the messages that we calibrated or
Mm-hmm.
integrated into the system so that the body can keep moving through.
Yeah.
So it might be that, there's different resources that are needed for one person. It might be like a planetary resource. It might be that they need grounding to reduce inflammation in the body. It might mean that they need some sun exposure on their skin to help the body to be able to move through the healing process and build a resource around that. It can be movement, it can be nutrition, and it can also be like fascia release or
Yeah.
movement
Brilliant.
based.
And my testimony with you was you reached a lot of areas in me that needed some stuff, but there was the fluoride in water,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
Significant for me. I could have done emotional talk, mental health therapies forever and not realized, because it wasn't like all I identified with is feeling low. And I am not, I just don't feel low. And you could see that, okay, you've got heavy metals you need to release, and there was different ways of doing that, right? So that was amazing for me, massive shift, whereas I thought I could have talked about that for the rest of my life and not come to that conclusion of that's what it is. So a typical scenario can be very different for each client, and I'm assuming the same as many practices, you get presenting issues of mobility and it's actually stored and coded trauma. It all swaps and changes very much in AMN as it does everywhere else. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it classed as somatic therapy, AMN, or is it something, what's it under the umbrella of, for those Christians out there that sometimes think these things are a bit, we need to explain in woo woo.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to explain that this is neuroscience and
Yeah.
somatic approach to healing. But where does AMN fall under for that?
It's very holistic in
Yeah.
its approach because we are looking at so many different areas of the body
Yeah.
and so many different resources.
Mhm.
But it does sit in somatic therapy. It does sit in quantum science. It definitely sits in neurology.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and I
So
mean, that to me in itself even proves the existence of God. Like
I
we are
like it.
just so, we are so complex.
Yeah. Fearfully and wonderfully made. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I absolutely went that scripture, and the whole when you're talking about signals and germ layers and heart and all that, and let that be still and know I'm God. I I find that most of the practice, and I'm sure from what I know of what you do, it's that stilling of the body, the chemical response and the body and the signals, to the point where we know who the true healer is. We know these techniques just lead us to
Yeah.
the positional aspect of receiving the healing. And that's the being still part. I find in this day and age, in the information age that we're in, and the stored and coded information, is just not able, people aren't able to hear from God and be still. Is that, do you find that in what
Mm.
you're doing with people? In many areas we see it in church and obviously, but with AMN.
Oh, hugely,
Yeah,
hugely. Because we are conditioned to be busy, I think that there's a lost art that
yeah,
we've completely missed out on. Like this, there's a whole generation that's just completely missed out on this art of just being okay with just breathing and
yeah.
sitting and
Oh,
breathing and pondering and meditating. Like, you've got the new age kind of meditation, but it was in the Bible first, people. Come on.
yeah,
He talks about
absolutely.
meditate on my word day and night. And
Mm.
it's so important for us to be able to know that we can go into that place where meditation is actually the use of imagination. It's like this whole quantum neuroscience thing all links back to the power and authority that we've been given through Christ to actually heal.
Yeah.
And it's the revelation. What I see is it's the revelation upon revelation. There's so many layers of revelation
Oh,
that can take place for us to move into this place of like, wow, I'm healed and whole of the Lord. Like I am. So, but it does sometimes take, I mean, I've seen miracles happen. Like I've seen people get brand new hearts in sessions. Like I've seen amazing God things happen in sessions where
yeah,
people are completely transformed, just bang straight off the
yeah,
bat. But
yeah,
what I know is that most people, it is like this level of revelation here, then we get another one here, then we get another one here. And it's all these little aha moments
yeah,
that bring the body into this place where the perception is acceptance of change.
yeah.
So it's
Amazing.
almost like this metanoia happens. It's a process of metanoia, instead
What's
of like,
metanoia? You'll have to explain
oh,
that.
it's a
Metanoia.
beautiful Hebrew word. It literally means the changing, like the acceptance of change. So it's like when we go from the darkness to the light, when we don't know God to when we know God, it's like
Yeah,
that beautiful
that's it.
revelation that
Yeah,
takes place. And
that's it.
sometimes that happens in stages for people. That's why we need grace upon grace upon grace, because we have revelation upon
Yeah.
revelation upon revelation.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. It's so beautifully put. It's just the way you articulate what you see, and the way you just see more people just falling in love and knowing who he is. That revelation alone. Be still. Why did he say be still and then know I'm God? Not get busy serving and doing everything and then know I'm God. It's be still and know I'm God. And these therapies that we're talking about, AMN being one of the most brilliant ones that's people need to know about, is about that, isn't it? It's the be still and those revelation upon revelation. Is there anything that AMN that you'd say no, this isn't for you?
I haven't come across it yet.
That's because God's sending your clients, so they're all the right ones.
This is true. But
Let-
there's not been one person that we've not been able to help to make changes or see changes in
yeah,
some way, shape, or form.
yeah, yeah.
A lot of the time when people, like, I'll have a second session with somebody and I'll say, oh, how are you feeling? Oh, I don't feel much better than what I did when I first saw you.
Hmm.
And when you start asking questions like, oh, how's your sleep been? And they're like, oh, actually, I have been sleeping better.
Yeah, they just
Or
haven't
how
observed it. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
So we just don't, until we ask the questions of people, people just don't know or don't see.
yeah, yeah. And for anyone watching this now, as we bring this interview to an end, and we probably have so many interviews out of this interview that we're going to do, but especially because this is for the Christian, the Christian people, even though obviously if you're not Christian, watching this equally works as well. But what's the ending thing you would like to say to somebody who is suffering an emotional, mental trauma? They know, is there a difference between, there's one more question in this. Is there a difference between going through trauma now, i.e., you are in trauma and suffering in trauma, or you know that trauma from the past is affecting your behaviors, emotions, and everything now? Is there a difference, or is AMN AMN and it works for all?
There is no difference.
Yeah.
There is no difference as far as what I can see anyway. With, I've been practicing for 8 years now, and like you said before, there's no time like there's no such concept of time. And that's the same kind of thing, like whether you're right in the middle of trauma now or you're living out of a perception of past trauma, the body keeps the score of everything that we go through. So I don't feel like there is any difference in that. It can help both ways, because what we're doing is finding those electrical charges that are creating inflammation. We're addressing the base counterpart of that, and then showing the brain and the body that it's actually safe to move and shift that out of the system. And then giving the body the right resources to be able to help that.
Brilliant. And we have like 4 minutes left, and I had one more question that I didn't ask, and then you can end with, what you would like to say to people. But what's the difference between AMN and, say, counseling or psychotherapy? Talking it out, understanding it out. What's the difference that you would say?
There's a big difference. There's a really big difference, because a lot of time, like I mentioned before, people won't even have an understanding of something that they've been through. I mean, we can have ancestral stuff passed down through DNA changes, right? And you wouldn't know if your body is sitting in that, because you've always had it. So that's not something that you can really talk about and hash out that way. But the revelation can come through talking, or even just that, when I say, oh, have you had this kind of trauma happen to in your life, like abandonment, like this is a massive one for a lot of people. And they'll be like, it's a constant thing in my life and I don't understand why. Like, why do I keep coming back around to this circle? And it's because sometimes talking through something can actually integrate that story back in to that organ on a somatic level. So we have these multiple layers of the same trauma because we've talked about it, and now it's back there. I mean, this is an interesting story. I had a lady who had had multiple stillbirths. And she had done so much incredible work on herself. Like she was just flourishing in this place of healing and was helping other women to come into that. But what had happened in the process was she had actually started writing a book. And so going back and rereading some of those old things started bringing up the old stuff again. And it was integrating.
Oh, you okay?
Okay, I'm back. Sorry. I was like, oh no, they're gone. Somebody was trying to call me, and I'm like, I'm not even on my phone. Yes. Why is this happening?
Right in the middle of that last bit.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah. So the reintegration, like of those traumas of that same message just kept coming back. And so her uterus, her ovaries were all like reintegrating this story and this message. And she was like, I cannot believe that did that. I was coming from a place of healing. I'm helping people in this space. And I'm like, and that's great, sweetheart. Like, it's amazing that you're doing that. But you've got to also be aware that every time you speak about it, you can actually lay the foundation for another.
Yeah. 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 And that is the whole point, isn't it? Once processed and left on that cellular level, you can talk about it all you want. But what we do have a lot of in the world now is people go through trauma. Their trauma becomes their purpose. their purpose then becomes their re-traumatization for life. And I know in England, when I was there, the social enterprise network was suffering so much in trauma depression, and the businesses wouldn't last 4 years because they were re-traumatizing every cellular level, and they thought they were healed. So this is a really important subject for really for governments and people to look at, because it's like social enterprises are so brilliant what they do for people, but charities and all these beautiful companies, but we need to realize that you can re-traumatize, and like you say, it can affect a lot of people, can't it? Oh, I think you've frozen again. What's happening? Are you there? Oh, really? Oh well, we are coming to an end of the interview, but can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Is there, so what I'm going to do, where and when I post this, there will be, your card or information that people can contact you. Is there anything you'd like to close this interview with, to say to anybody?
Oh, look, there's so much we could say.
Not
Um,
another half an hour.
yeah, true. I think with AMN, the ease of being able to do an AMN session is it's great because it's basically what it looks like is this: you and I
Yeah,
speaking. I'm
yeah,
doing muscle testing. We're getting to the bottom of issues.
yeah.
So you can literally be anywhere in the world and dressed in anything. Like I've had people sitting in bed with their pajamas on during a session. So it's
You don't
just
have
one
to
of
leave
those
your
things.
home.
Right.
Mm,
It's so
mm,
good. You can
yeah,
just be you do you. And we can
yeah,
get to the bottom of things. But yeah, I would say for anyone that is interested in trying AMN, I think for me it's one of those things that I'm so passionate about people knowing about how their bodies actually work
yeah,
and what they're
yeah,
trying to say to them. So if you get nothing else out of an AMN session, you will definitely know what your body has been trying to tell you for all of these years. And I
amazing.
think there's so much power in the revelation of knowing. Like I know that saying is knowledge is power, but I really feel like wisdom
Yeah,
is, because
yeah,
it's when we know that we can apply the wisdom to help to make sure that we're happy, healthy humans and on purpose and on fire for God.
yeah,
And a
yeah,
beautiful thing is that when you're healed, when you're in that place of healing, there are so many people that need you
yeah,
because they're
yes,
going through, there's so many people going through.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm, yeah, yeah. That is beautifully put. I absolutely love that. And I could interview you for hours. So I have to say, we'll stop now because I'm trying to do half an hour podcasts, so that people can fit it into their walks and their days. But we will set this up and we will start to talk more about. There's so many questions that I can ask you about AMN, but we will continue this on another time. So thank you so much, Jules. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to doing another interview with you soon. Okay, I'm stopping the recording.